Carpenter interview, take 5.
Thank you.
What, you want me to read this?
Or say it, whichever you're comfortable with.
Freedom has a taste to it, to those who fight and almost die, that the protected will never know. I believe this was found written on a cell in Hanoi, and I'm not sure which prison or who found it. I'm pretty sure that's how that was found. He didn't originate this. That's a couple of words different from the way I remember it.
How do you remember it, sir?
I don't really know exactly, but there's something about it doesn't look quite right.
Okay. Or may I ask you to speak to me about freedom, sir?
Freedom? It's a precious commodity that really so few people in this world actually have or understand. Americans, at least older Americans in my age group, I think recognize it as a basic tenet of being an American, as a part of our society, as part of our legacy. It is a hard-won part of our history. But I'm afraid today's youth and a lot of people around the world don't have the same feeling for it. They just don't understand it. It doesn't really mean, in my view, the ability to say or do anything you want to, whenever you want to, under whatever circumstances. No, that's not freedom. That's childishness. But freedom is a way to live without being dictated to and governed by others, particularly government, your own or somebody else's, but that's kind of intangible and hard to understand for some people, but that's the way I see it. A very important thing, though, Paul Galante expressed it very well. Freedom is being able to live behind a door without a lock on it, or to be able to go to the door and walk through it anytime you want to. The door in your own home or some public place. I'm not doing well by his expression of it, but that's it. It's the freedom to act in a responsible way according to your own volition and not at the direction of others.
Beautiful. And when does, you have a beautiful home on the water.
It's very modest.
Are there moments when you step out to raise your flag or work in your yard, or the meaning of freedom comes to you in a way that can...
Oh yeah, all the time.
Speak to me about that. And if you would, because my voice won't be in the edit, kind of repeat the question with the answer.
Patrick,
Yes,
can I
sir.
make one quick change?
Sure.
Sherry, that chair got pulled out, the second chair.
The white chairs?
Yeah, the one on the right. Can you just push that in?
But this one stays out?
That's fine. Thank you very much. Sorry, sir.
Mm-hmm.
And let's remember to get a chip architect.
Yeah, it's in
Okay.
my...
So in your own words, could you incorporate the question? Like, these are the little things that I'm doing in my life. I go out and I ride on my tractor, or I play with my drone, or whatever it is.
I live with and appreciate freedom every day. You have seen the view that we have to the east, down the river, and that's an ever-changing view. There are some days when it looks like some other days, but for the most part, the seasons, the time of day, the weather, and other circumstances, perhaps the amount of traffic on the river, all affect the view down the river. And so many Americans, and probably those who are more well-to-do than others take such things for granted. They think they're entitled to it, or they worked hard for it, or whatever. To me, there's a whole other aspect to it. I can look out there off our deck and down the river and see whitecaps. I can see little ripples. I can see the sun glancing off the water. I can see the osprey, the eagles, or whatever. All of that is freedom.
Says, all right.
Yeah.
Let me take a drink of water. The osprey.
Yeah, osprey and eagles and critters. We'll see beaver, strangely enough, down there sometimes. Otters, porpoises out come up the river, whole pods of them. Not frequently, but we see them. These are all different aspects of freedom. They're my freedom, the animal's freedom, and I don't take them for granted. Because for so many years, I was behind that door. I couldn't get out. There were, in some of the cells I lived in, there was no view of the outside at all, not a glimpse of the sky. The sky is freedom. You know, when I look at the sky, that's what I see. Others who haven't been subject to the experience I have might see something else there. Some might see heaven. Some might see just blue. Isn't it pretty or whatever? No. It's freedom because I can fly away. Of course, there's nothing that expresses freedom quite so well as the flight of a bird. And we're very aware of the birds, the big birds around there, because we have a small dog. And even an osprey could kill our dog. An eagle could certainly kill our dog, and so could a great horned owl. We have them all there. Which doesn't make them bad, they're just part of nature. And they're exerting their influence on freedom. It's their own freedom. And if they're able to get in there and kill my dog and eat it, then, that's the way it goes. I'm not going to allow it if I can. So we're each manipulating our own freedoms to the degree that we can. No freedom is totally free, I guess, except perhaps freedom of the mind. We have a few philosophers who can escape the surly bonds of earth by a mental exercise. I'm perhaps not there, but freedom means a lot to me. And I hope I never lose it, and I hope my country never loses it. That concerns me greatly now.
Thank you. I'm going to adjust expressing yourself. It's really a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
This is a good one to ask you because you're a funny man. Phil Butler talked about in prison life you could never lose your sense of humor.
Who's this now?
Phil Butler.
Oh, okay.
He said in prison life you could never lose your sense of humor. Whether it was the guard or with your buddies, you had to keep a grasp on humor. This was imperative, especially during the worst times. Those moments of such deep despair that death looked equally reasonable. You have a great sense of humor. I've truly enjoyed. I've been laughing along with your whimsy and quirks. What can you say about the role of humor? Many of the former POWs have talked about how distinctly American their humor was and how it really stood in contrast to the Vietnamese, who were much more humorless. Can you speak to me about humor?
Well, to me, it's essential. I mean, life without humor is life not worth living. It'd be pretty darn dull, and what's the point? But when you can have fun, other people sharing it, it relaxes them, it makes them feel better, it makes me feel better. So humor is a very important part of my life, and I think I hesitate to use the word blessed, but with an understanding of humor and ability to use it, some naturally, some perhaps forced, I don't know. But I have even, well, as many of us have, I think, been able to see humor in humorless situations. One of which is a story I can tell you, if you want to hear it. Well, this was back during a Cuban program, and I was called into interrogation quiz. And there were two interrogators in there, Fidel, and one of the interrogators, a Vietnamese interrogator we'd known for years, and we called him Elf.
And just for the viewer who might not be aware that it's not Fidel Castro, can you explain that you gave nicknames to your interrogators, one of them because he was Cuban being Fidel?
Yes, yeah, that's right. We gave, it just kind of developed naturally that we had to name everything. You've got to be able to quantify and qualify things. So we had given names to all of our guards, to our interrogators, and the places where we lived. As it turns out with Fidel, I'm not sure, but I may have been the one who named him Fidel. It's communicating between buildings. You wanted a short name but easily recognizable. And with Fidel, and I was doing hand signals at that point, and I was talking with Ed Hubbard across a distance of maybe 100 feet. And we were quite afraid that we might get caught, so you wanted to get your communication done with as quickly as possible. And it was easy enough once we established a name for this guy. We had determined that he was probably Cuban. He was the head guy, and Fidel would certainly be a recognizable name. Nobody was going to confuse him with Fidel Castro, but it was easy to call him Fidel. And that was F-I-D. So as soon as you started with the F, eventually that became enough. You just say quiz, and this is quiz. Quiz with Fidel, W-I-F, or Q-W-F, and then tell them what happened. And that's the first time I remember that name. I think maybe I came up with it, but I won't. I take no pride of authorship, but so that was the name he had. And then his underlings were Chico and Pancho, and I don't know how we came up with that either, but they're both short names and distinctively Spanish. But anyway, going back, I went to quiz, and excuse me, it was with Fidel, and Fidel was about 6'2", I'm guessing, and he sat behind a desk, as the interrogator typically did, and he sat on a chair, and next to him was Elf. We'd been dealing with Elf for quite some time, and he was, I don't know what his rank was, but he wasn't very high up there. He'd have been probably an O2 or something. Skinny little guy. He'd be lucky if he weighed 80, 85 pounds. Short, skinny, and he was a chain smoker, and he rolled his own. You've probably heard some of the stories about the Vietnamese tobacco, and generally speaking, it was green and wet, or at the very least green, and they made their own up, and they rolled them. And they rolled these great big things about the size of my finger. So while Fidel was going through his intro for this particular quiz, he said, and I have here with me my my comrade. So he may ask you some questions. But in the meantime, I ask you the question. You answer the question. You understand? See, yes, I understand. I never said see. No. You didn't want to bite off any more trouble than you could stand. So in the meantime, Elf has rolled this cigarette, and he's got a lighter there. And he gets the thing up, he's got small hands, little guy, and he's holding the thing like this. And this green tobacco, you had to keep air flowing through it fast. So. So Fidel, in the meantime, he's ignoring this guy until this point, and he could see that he was ready. And so, do you have something you want to say, comrade? So he's sucking on this cigarette, and I'm sitting down there, and I'm on a stool about that high. Always the person being interrogated is much lower than the interrogator. And I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking, American sense of humor. Damn. Why now? But there it was. So Fidel started talking, and he was asking me one thing and another, and every other sentence, here's Elf over there. And he just about pass out, because he was hyperventilating. And then I could see Fidel really looking at me like, laugh, you bastard. You laugh, I have you. I didn't. I kept a straight face as straight as I could. Every once in a while, I might have tensed up, but I didn't laugh. And somehow, I got through it. And in the meantime, Elf had gone through 2 or 3 cigarettes, and I had to witness the whole thing over again, trying to get it started initially, and then to keep it going. He would suck on that thing like there was no tomorrow.
Wonderful story.
Not much about leadership, but
You know what? It is, actually. You talked about the importance of Carolyn and your kids, about part of the motivation for you to return with honor was how you could carry yourself upon returning to those in your family and to your society, really. One of the things that the military is looking at is the returning warrior. How do we best look at those who return from the field of conflict and to welcome them back and help them reintegrate? What things did you find upon your return that were particularly helpful to you? And were also there things about your return that were lonely that you realized no one but your other former POWs could understand?
well, I don't know, but that kind of takes me naturally into one of the sad things about our return. The war was so unpopular, and it had been going on for so long, and it was so bad. And as we found out when we came home, the POW return was a focal point of the whole damn war. It was brought down into just this. If we get them home and we'll honor them for what they endured and get this behind us so we never have to think about it again, well, that's fine, except for everybody else that came home before us and would come home after us, who got no recognition, got spat upon, got treated terribly. We're told not to wear their uniforms in public. It was tough to come home to that, knowing these guys who had sat in foxholes, seen their buddies blown up and their guts spilling out on them as they died. To know what they'd been through. And then we, who in many ways, or at least many of us, felt that we had not endured, we'd endured a lot for a long time, but it wasn't that kind of thing. The warrior aspect of it wasn't up close and personal when you're in jail, because you can't do a thing to hurt him, and he can kill you. So it's a totally different matter. When you're fighting face to face with bayonets or hand grenades or whatever, that's a different matter. I killed a lot of the enemy from an airplane, from a distance, I know I killed him. I killed him with bullets, I killed him with rockets, I killed him with bombs, but they weren't right in my face. I didn't see that happen. The closest I got was seeing my guys, but even there, it was at a distance. If somebody got hit and lost their airplane, had to eject and whatever, it was over and gone. I couldn't hang around to see it. You got a guy that's not moving in an airplane doing 400 or 500 knots. It's not the same thing. So there's tremendous sadness on the part of most of us. Appreciation for the way we were treated, because we were treated like kings. We really were. Because it was the focus of the whole damn rotten war. What's the word I want to use? Anyway, the relief of ridding oneself of, or ridding our whole society of the stain and horror of the war. They could do by welcoming us home properly. That's the way I saw it, and I think most of us did. And while we appreciated it, poor guys, a private in a foxhole somewhere, he wasn't treated right. So what did they concentrate on? William Calley and whatever, a few atrocities that occurred over there, which it doesn't surprise me. Atrocities occur in any war. When I think back to some of the targets I had, some of the things that I did in the air over there, maybe looking back, I wish that I hadn't. But you're in a wartime situation. You're trying to survive and get the job done without getting killed or captured, which, by the way, for most of us was a far worse circumstance than getting killed. Captured they didn't want any of that. So that was kind of, I don't know if that answers your question very well, but it was the end of the war that brought this whole sad affair to an end, and not in a happy way. It was only happy for us and for the population who could look at it and say, "Well, we got the POWs home. Now let's get on with life." Well, you can get on with life, but you got thousands, hundreds of thousands of men and women who served in the combat theater. They're not getting over it.
In terms of your personal experience, beyond the experience in the nation at large, you spent all these years incarcerated, your freedoms taken away, restricted, all your choices being made for you except the ones you could resist with internally. You get home, you're reunited with your wife and children. Do you remember any circumstance? I was talking with Red McDaniel and his wife, and I said to Dot, do you remember the first time you got irritated at Red and let yourself just be irritated at him? And she said, "Oh, I do. I remember one day I just got mad at him about something, and I started yelling at him, and my mother was in the kitchen, and she turned to me and said, 'Dot, it's so good to hear you yelling at him again.'" And she said, and I realized in that moment we were having normal again. Like, was there a time or a string of times when you realized you were starting to find normal again? And speak to me a little bit about that. That's part of what we're trying to help these returning warriors understand.
It took a while to get back to normal. And there was no sudden point at which it occurred. In fact, to preface that a little bit, I was frankly amazed after 6.5 years that I spent in prison. Coming out, we're on the C-141s coming out, and we cleared the coast. And we were notified by the flight crew, we've just cleared the coast, we're feet wet, we're heading to the Philippines. And we all cheered and whatever. But I thought, I'm cheering, and I'm just going through the motions. And I looked around, everybody else is cheering, and I thought, are they feeling the emotion that they're showing? Because I'm not. I'm dead. I felt nothing. And really what it was, I'm firmly convinced, over all those years of hope and forecasting beyond hope, you know, well, we're going to get out by Christmas, we'll be out by New Year's, we'll be out by Easter, be out for the kids' birthdays or whatever. And it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. So you build this shell around you. And now it happens. I'm out. Hallelujah. Wow. Dead. Still insulated by that shell. And it amazed me at the time and thereafter, because I expected, well, one of these days there's going to be a dam burst, and we'll be on the other side of it. Didn't happen with me. I can only speak for myself. But it just slowly released to normalcy until one day I got thinking about it, and it's over. There's not going to be a flood. And I'm an emotional person, as you know. No, it didn't happen. What does affect me is shows of caring and concern and love. I can witness those at weddings, at funerals, at family gatherings, and in other circumstances. When I see an expression of love and caring in between people I don't know, that gets me emotional. But the release of finally being free and recognizing it and experiencing the joy, no, it never happened to me.
I've gone through the questions that I had in mind, but I wanted to make sure I opened it up to you. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about, or something you wanted, and we'll get another chance at your house to talk a little bit, but I just wanted to include your thoughts or your something that we didn't touch on that you would have liked to have touched on, or if you have a message for future warriors, future leaders that learn from your experience that you could share.
No, they're the old plums that everybody comes up with, I guess. Believe in yourself, believe in your family, believe in your country. Without those things, and I say believe in yourself, I don't mean be selfish, just believe in your ability to do things, to cope with things, to handle the bad with the good. Have some strength, some internal strength. If you have that, and then a little bit, well, maybe not a little bit, but certainly trust.
Sorry, sir.
Yeah.
Certainly trust.
Yeah, certainly trust in others, particularly those with whom you will serve and fight. Why are you doing it? You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. You're not doing it because they pay you really good money to be an ensign in the Navy or even a commander in the Navy. And I'm not complaining. I'm very, very happy for a guy who came up through the ranks. I'm successful in my own eyes, and that's okay for me. And I think that's a human quality. You know, we each have different levels of what we would perceive to be success. But the big thing, again, is remember that if you go into combat, forget about all the lofty ideals and so forth. Almost certainly you will be in combat for your buddy, for the people you fight with, the people that you know, the people you would trust with your life or your money or your wife. That's what it's all about. Now, my line of business, I was also trained as a nuclear weapons delivery officer. That means my little airplane could put on a great big bomb as far as its potential for inflicting damage. and go out and drop it. Now, in a case like that, that indicates all-out war against some power somewhere else in the world. And at a time like that, you might be thinking, well, this is for my country. This is for a huge, noble cause. But the most of the little guerrilla wars and backwoods jungle operations we're going to have and clawing through the sand and fighting scorpions or whatever else, they're not going to be in that scope. You're going to be down there doing a job. Hopefully your country's going to benefit from it, but mostly you're just going to try to keep each other alive, because that's where it all comes down to ultimately.
I'm amazed at you. Thank you so much for sharing and for your service to all of us. But your honesty and just the quality of the way that you are willing to reveal the innermost parts of this is just incredible. Thank you.
No, thank you for the opportunity.